This is Pre-Calculus Concept 8a, common functions and their graphs. There are 6 boxes, so let's get going right away. For most of the rest of the year, we're going to be using a lot of function notation. We're hoping this is something you've all seen before, but a quick review. When you see a f of x expression, f is simply the name of the function, and this notation f of x means that you're going to be inputting values into the function. On the right side of the equation you have the actual function rule, and you're simply going to be plugging your inputs, which is your x, into this formula to get your answer. This is not multiplication over here. A lot of people think when they first see f of x that it's f times x, but it's really something completely different. So let's do an example. If you are asked to evaluate f of 2, what you're going to do is think of 2 as your input, and then simply replace every x in the function rule with your input of 2. So I would get 3 times 2 squared minus 2 times 2 plus 5. And we work that out, I get 3 times 4 minus 4 plus 5, and I get 12 minus 4 plus 5, and final answer of 13. So we say that the value of the function f at 2 equals 13. Second example, very common to make mistakes with negatives, so once again you have to be very careful. I want to do 3 times my new input, this time negative 5, squared minus 2 times negative 5 plus 5, and again being really careful with my negatives. This is going to be 3 times positive 25. And then I'm going to subtract 2 times negative 5, which is really going to be adding 10, right? Double negative there. And then plus 5. So this would be 75 plus 10 plus 5, and the value of the function f evaluated at negative 5 is going to be 90. Okay, box 2 is a u-try for the function g of x equals negative 2x squared plus 5x. Take a minute and evaluate g of negative 3. Again, be really careful with that negative sign. Okay, hopefully you got negative 33, so it's negative 2 and negative 3 squared plus 5 times negative 3, negative 2 times positive 9 minus 15 gives you negative 18 minus 15, which is negative 33. Alright, we're going to find it really useful to think about functions in a visual way, so the rest of this lesson is going to be about graphing functions. One option you always have is to simply find a lot of points on the function and then see if you can see the pattern and what the graph looks like. So f of x equals x squared is a function you've all looked at quite a bit, maybe not in function notation. I'm going to really quickly fill in the chart over here with some values of f of x, right? So if my input is negative 3, my output would be negative 3 squared, and that of course is 9. Negative 2, if that's my input, my output's going to be 4, and I think you can pretty quickly fill in the table with the rest of these values. And what I want to think of, whoops, that's going to be a 4 and a 9, is that each of these values is really just a coordinate on an xy plane. So when my input x is negative 3, my output's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so that's actually a point on the function, right? Negative 2, 4 is another point on the function. Negative 1, 1 is a point on the function. 0, 0 is a point on the function. 1, 1. And 2, 4 and 3, 9. So when you talk about the function, it's not just these 7 points, but it's really every other point that you could possibly think of. And so really I'd want to kind of take this idea to infinity and plug in as many numbers as I could think of. And eventually I'll get a graph that's represented, and every single point on the graph would satisfy the function rule. So most of you probably remember the x squared graph is this parabola shape. So we're going to learn 7 functions today, and you want to be familiar with each and every one of these graphs. Your very first one here is f of x equals x squared. Alright, another option you have in graphing functions is to use technology. So I'm going to ask you to pull out your calculator, and we're going to graph f of x equals root x. Alright, I don't have an interactive calculator on my videos, but we'll just take a look at a screenshot here. So if you've never used your graphing calculator before, anytime you want to graph a function, you first need to go to the y equals button, which is right there, and you're going to simply type in whatever function we're looking at. In this case, it's y equals x, square root of x. Most of your functions you're going to find on your keypad, but there are certain ones you may have trouble finding. Be sure to check the math key if you have trouble. That lists some less familiar, less common functions that aren't on your keypad. Second thing you always need to think about when you're doing a graph on your calculator is your window. So there is a window button on your top menu here, and you always want to kind of think about a window that's appropriate for your particular function. So the real important ones here are the x min and x max, and the y min and y max. And basically you're just setting a certain window for your calculator to graph. A quick way to get a 10 by 10 window is to hit zoom and then the number 6. So zoom 6 will always set your calculator to a 10 by 10 window. Okay, and finally you're going to hit the graph button over here on the right. And when you hit that, we do in fact see our function. Kind of small on here, but you should recognize that graph as well as a function hopefully you've seen before. One thing your calculator doesn't show you is the arrow on the end, so you want to get in the habit of drawing the arrow. That just shows that the graph goes on forever. Alright, so you're going to oftentimes use your calculator to graph functions. Alright, another option you have for graphing functions is to use a program we're going to use quite a bit in this class called Desmos. So real quick, like you open up a new browser and type in desmos.com and hit the button that says Start Graphing. Alright, I think you're going to like Desmos a lot. You can use it right on your laptop, right along with the videos if you ever need to. When you are ready to graph, you're going to get the screen that looks a lot like this. Up here you can type in any function you want to look at. You can also play around with the colors a little bit if you'd like. You've got a keypad, so you can use your keyboard to graph these, and then obviously on the right hand side here you have the graph. Once again, the computer doesn't show the arrows, so I really want to show that that graph kind of goes on forever like that. But here's a quick way of graphing the function f of x equals absolute value of x. Alright, box 6, we're going to finish with a u-try. Down below here are 4 functions, and I'd like you to do a sketch of each. Some you may know right off the bat, others you might have to use either your calculator or Desmos to come up with a sketch. These 4 are also ones you're going to be responsible for, so take a minute and see if you can sketch a graph of each of these functions. Alright, I did a little Desmos shot of each one of these functions. Hopefully you got graphs that look like this. F of x equals 2 is called a constant function because whatever your input is, your output is always going to be the same thing. The result of that is a horizontal line, so should have had a horizontal line at y equals 2. F of x equals x cubed is this graph that has a little squiggle in it, and that's another one that you want to be familiar with. F of x equals x, we call that the identity function. Whatever you stick into the function, you get the exact same thing out. It ends up being a line with slope of 1 that passes through the origin. And then the last one probably you're a little less familiar with, but the cube root function is also a little squiggle graph that kind of squiggles the other way. And that's another graph that you want to be familiar with. So altogether, we got 7 kind of basic functions that you should know. 4 of them are on this page, and the other 3 were the previous examples. Make sure you're comfortable, familiar with graphing those 7 functions. We'll be doing a lot of that in the next couple lessons.